Today, we are tackling one of the oldest, darkest questions out there. Is war just some terrible thing we invented? A tragic flaw of civilization? Or is it something deeper? Something that's actually hardwired right into our DNA?
So let's frame this with the two big ideas about war and peace. On one side, you've got idealism. This is the hopeful view, right? The idea that with enough progress and reason, we can and we will eventually evolve beyond war. But on the other side, you've got realism. And realism says, hold on. If you want any kind of real peace, you first have to look in the mirror and accept a much, much harder truth about who we are.
To really get to the bottom of this, we're not going to start with human history. No, we're starting with biology. We have to go back, way back, before civilization even existed, and look at our closest living relatives in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees. Because what they do, well, it's the foundation for this whole realist argument. We have this almost romantic idea, don't we? That animals are out there living in some kind of natural harmony. That it was us, humans, who came along and messed everything up with politics and greed. We just kind of picture them as these peaceful beings. But here's the thing. For a long time, that was the scientific view, too. It wasn't until scientists like the amazing Jane Goodall actually went out there and spent decades watching chimpanzees in the wild that a much darker, way more complicated, and frankly more human picture started to emerge.
And the reality? It's pretty jarring. Chimps do stuff that is eerily familiar. They form organized war parties to patrol their territory and ambush their rivals. They hunt systematically. And this is chilling. When a new alpha male takes over, he'll often kill all the infants of his predecessor. It's a way to secure his own genetic line. This isn't just random violence. It is strategic. It's organized.
And the source material really doesn't pull any punches on this. This whole idea that animals of the same species don't kill each other, it's a total myth. When it comes to our closest relatives, lethal violence is just a part of life. They kill them. It's that simple.
So, what's the crucial point here? It suggests that this capacity for organized, lethal violence isn't something we learn from society. It might be a genetic predisposition, a behavioral trait we actually inherited from a common ancestor that we share with chimps. This idea is the absolute cornerstone of the realist argument.
Okay, so if this tendency for conflict exists in our primate cousins, the next logical question is, what about our own direct ancestors? This brings us to the next piece of the puzzle, where we have to tackle another really popular myth, the idea of the peaceful, noble savage.
You've probably heard this story before, the idea that war is a product of civilization, that it only really got started once we invented farming and property and cities. So the big question is, was the world of our hunter-gatherer ancestors really some kind of conflict-free utopia? Now, to get this, you have to appreciate the massive timescale we're talking about. For over 99% of human history, we were hunter-gatherers. This wasn't some brief phase, it was our natural state for millions of years. Look at this timeline from ancient Japan, for example. You had a complex hunter-gatherer society that thrived for thousands of years before farming even showed up. So for looking for our inherent nature, this is where we have to look. And the evidence that realists point to is just, well, it's overwhelming. Archaeologists find Stone Age skeletons with skulls smashed in by clubs. They find ancient bones with arrowheads still stuck in them. Now, sure, an idealist might say this evidence is rare, it doesn't prove widespread war. But for a realist, it confirms that lethal violence was part of the human story long before we ever built the first city wall.
And the reasons for all this violence, they were brutally simple and primal, and they echo exactly what we see in the animal kingdom. These conflicts were about survival and reproduction, fighting over hunting grounds, scarce food, or access to mates. The basics.
So if conflict has pretty much always been with us, what changed? Why do we have these epic battles in our history books involving thousands of soldiers instead of just small tribal fights? Well, the answer, in a word, is technology.
Think about it. For most of history, violence was a constant, but its scale was limited by the tools people had. Clubs and stones. But then, one single technological breakthrough happened that was like pouring gasoline on a fire. It made human conflict exponentially more destructive.
And there it is, iron. Once humans figured out how to forge strong, durable, sharp metal weapons on a massive scale, the entire nature of war was transformed forever. We can see a perfect case study of this back in ancient Japan. During the Stone Age Jomon period, We see evidence of conflict, sure, but it seems to be pretty limited. Then, bam, the Yayoi period begins and iron is introduced. All of a sudden, the archaeological record is just filled with evidence of larger, more organized, and way deadlier warfare, all driven by the brutal efficiency of metal weapons. So, when you take all this evidence together, from our primate cousins to our prehistoric ancestors to the invention of iron, it forces us to look at the whole purpose of civilization in a completely new and different light. I mean, think about it. If that idealistic hope is misplaced, if we can't just evolve past our violent instincts, then what's the goal? Why do we bother building cities and creating laws and forming governments if this beast is always going to be there inside of us? The realist perspective offers this three-step framework. It's a total paradigm shift. First, you have to acknowledge the instinct. Just accept the hard truth. Second, you abandon what might be an impossible goal, getting rid of conflict entirely. And third, and this is the big one, you realize the true, maybe even magnificent purpose of civilization, to create rules to manage the violence. And these rules, this is what realists see as true human progress. It's not the absence of war, but the painstaking, centuries-long creation of systems to contain it. Things like the Geneva Conventions that make a distinction between a soldier and a civilian, basic rules of surrender. We haven't eliminated the fight, but we have tried to put it in a smaller and smaller cage. And let's not forget this staggering fact. Our DNA is over 99% identical to that of chimpanzees, the same relatives that show organized warfare, territorial killing, and infanticide. That violent potential, it's not just in some distant cousin. It's woven right into our own genetic code. So, the huge takeaway from this entire realist perspective is this. Society's greatest achievement may not be a cure for our violent nature, but an incredible ongoing management system for it. The idealist dreams of a world without conflict. The realist, on the other hand, works for a world with less conflict, governed by rules that protect the innocent from the very worst parts of our nature. And that leaves us with a final, really challenging question for our own time. If we accept this premise, that this capacity for conflict is a permanent part of the human condition, how does that change the way we approach building a more peaceful future? What kind of systems do we need to build, not to deny our nature, but to manage it wisely?